Somewhat recently, a viewer of this channel asked me if I'd be interested in playing and reviewing this game. To be completely honest with you, I hadn't even heard of it until then, so I did some digging and then I told that viewer that I would do what I could to make it happen. I then reached out to Konami and wouldn't you know it, they were kind enough to provide me with a review code for the Switch version of the game. So here it is, let's talk about Getsufumaden Undying Moon. Getsufumaden Undying Moon is a side-scrolling action-adventure game developed and published by Konami. After doing some research, I discovered that there was actually a Getsufumaden game released back in 1987 on the NES, although you'd be forgiven for not knowing that as it was only ever released in Japan. This brand new up-to-date version with the Undying Moon subtitle plays in a very similar way to the original but differs in one rather major way. This new version is actually a side-scrolling hack-and-slash roguelike game instead of just a 2D side-scrolling action platformer. It incorporates many of the common roguelike systems, including the main mechanic of the genre. And that mechanic is basically dying and going back to the beginning of the game but slowly getting stronger each time you do. Officially, the game's being advertised as a 2.5D rogue-vania, which, to be fair, does sum it up pretty well. The game features 8 procedurally generated levels and the player controls Fuma, the 27th leader of the Getsu clan, in an attempt to close the gate to hell. The entire game is presented in this painted style known as ukiyo-e, which translates to pictures of the floating world. Fuma himself, the enemies, the platforms, and most of the backgrounds are all rendered in a 3D cel-shaded style, but are only displayed on a 2D plane. As Fuma, you'll be able to hack and slash your way through enemies using a simple single button combo, performing a special weapons attack, or using one of your sub-weapons which are mapped to the left and right triggers. You can carry 2 main weapons and 2 sub-weapons at a time, and these can all be swapped out and changed whenever you discover a new one. Let's say you have 4 weapons equipped already, 2 main and 2 sub. Maybe you have a sword and a club, but you find a spear that you like the look of during a run. Simply stand over it and press the button to pick it up, and you'll have the option to replace either your sword or your club with that spear. If you decide you don't want the spear, you can break it down into materials that can be used later for upgrades. Be careful though, because if you die, you'll lose all of the materials unless you've already unlocked a skill that lets you keep some of them upon death. It's also worth noting that main weapons can't be sub-weapons and sub-weapons can't be main weapons. Sub-weapons tend to be used at range and have a limited amount of uses before they enter a cooldown. Things like kunai, shuriken, bows, bombs, and rifles are pretty common sub-weapons. Luckily, you won't take any damage from merely brushing up against an enemy, but due to the nature of roguelike games, you'll be rewarded for taking the time to learn what each enemy is capable of. You're able to jump and double jump to get out of harm's way, as well as being able to dodge roll, which will actually allow you to move through an enemy and get behind them. Like pretty much every other game in this genre, knowledge is your key to victory. If you learn exactly how to fight each enemy within a given level, you'll soon be clearing it very quickly, taking little to no damage. If you do happen to take damage, however, you start each run with 2 potions that will recover most of your HP. You can get extra potions throughout the levels, but these are very few and far between, so do use them wisely. You'll also find a ton of loot chests in each level full of goodies and materials that can be used for upgrading weapons and to improve Fuma himself. Each run starts at the Getsu family estate, where you can pick up a starting weapon, check your enhancements and upgrades, then set out on your adventure. If you happen to die at any time during a run, this is where you'll return to. Think of it as your home base. However, if you manage to make it through a level, you'll need to defeat a boss to progress to the next area. I'm only showing you the first one here, but there's one at the end of every stage that you will need to master. These bosses do not stay dead, and if you die after beating them, you will need to fight through the entire level and defeat the boss again every time. Lastly, you'll have 2 difficulty settings to choose from, at least at first. These are essentially a standard difficulty and a slightly easier one. Dying will still require you to restart from the beginning though, regardless of the difficulty level that you choose. So what do I think of Getsufumaden Undying Moon? Well, as I said, I'd never even heard of it until it was mentioned to me in my comment section. I do like to take requests when possible, so I looked up the game and it looked pretty cool, so I decided to give it a go. Thing is though, when I looked it up, I saw some screenshots and yeah, I thought it looked pretty cool, but I didn't realize it was a roguelike game until I played it. Now, I don't actually enjoy roguelike games in general. However, I think you guys know me by now. I cannot enjoy a certain type of game, but I can still see why it's good and why other people might like it. I mean, I played Hades on this channel once, and that game is an absolute masterpiece of the genre. It's a great game, but do I like it? Well, no, not really. I only managed to get to, I think, perhaps the third area, something like that, and then I gave up and moved on to something else. This is one of those situations where I believe that most people who played and didn't like Hades would say that the game was bad or make up some excuse as to why they don't like it. To be honest, I probably would have said something similar in my younger years, but these days, I understand that it's my problem. You know, it's not Hades' fault that I'm not into it. Hades or the roguelike genre just isn't for me. It wasn't made for me, and I accept that. And this also feeds into the Elden Ring, Dark Souls easy mode argument as well. I personally believe that if you have to bend and break a video game and take a detour from the vision that the developers had for it, just to conform to your standards, then you're probably missing the point of the game entirely. Imagine saying I think Hades should have infinite continues or should give you a checkpoint every time you beat a boss. Sure, it would make my life easier in that specific game, but it would ruin the entire point of the game and the genre, not to mention the fact that you'd probably blast through it in a single evening. So why do I bring all this up? Well, because it's applicable to Getsufumaden and my feelings towards it. Once again, I'm going to say it. Not everything is for everyone, and that's okay. I liked and enjoyed specific parts of this game. I thought the art style was gorgeous despite running on the Switch, and also, I'd say that the combat was pretty fun once I got used to it. Do I like the game overall though? Honestly, no, I don't, because it's simply not for me. In fact, the roguelike genre is not for me, as I just said, and that's alright. The game may not be my personal cup of tea, but I do quite a bit of research when I do these videos, and I thoroughly understand what roguelike players want from their games. From what I understand, I think this is probably one of the better roguelike games to be released in recent memory, and if you're into this type of game, you should absolutely check it out. The only thing that might let it down for some people would be the performance and the missed inputs. As I mentioned, this game is currently only available for the Nintendo Switch and PC. The version that I'm playing and that you're seeing here is the Nintendo Switch version, and to me it feels very slow and sluggish. Sometimes the game seems to miss my button inputs as well. I notice this most often during jumps and double jumps. It happened more times than I would consider acceptable actually. On the Nintendo Switch, the game's going to be running at 30 FPS, and in my experience it often dips below that during combat. I don't think it's unplayable or anything like that, but it doesn't always feel that great to play, at least as far as I'm concerned. I looked up some gameplay and some benchmarks of the PC version, and unsurprisingly, that version looks so much sharper and clearer. It seems to easily be able to hit 60 FPS and can get to around to 120 FPS at 1440p on a mid-range PC. Needless to say, the Switch version is going to suffer in comparison, but as you can see, it doesn't exactly look that bad and it plays relatively well. I don't think it's been officially announced yet, but it does seem like, from what I've read, that the game will appear on PlayStation and Xbox consoles sometime in 2022. So if you are interested in it and you want to play it but you don't have a PC, it may actually be best to wait. In my opinion, Getsufumaden Undying Moon is a well-made and authentic roguelike experience that should please most fans of the genre. These games are not something that I personally enjoy, but that said, I do understand them. Despite my aversion to the core mechanics of the game, I still think it's got a great art style, good combat, and some well-executed subsystems to hold it all up. Ultimately, I'm not the target audience for this game. However, that doesn't mean I can't be objective and review the game based on what it is instead of what I would want it to be. If roguelike games are your thing, then yeah, I absolutely recommend this one to you. Just be aware that the Nintendo Switch version is probably not the ideal place to play it. If you enjoyed the video, I really hope you'll consider subscribing, and if you like what I do and want to help support the channel, please check out the first link in the video description down below. Thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you next time.